Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening. This is Zuzana Mukumai from Intercultural Relationships Celebrate Your Differences. And today I am here with Denise, who is going to introduce herself in just 1 minute. And we are going to talk about intercultural parenting. And I'm so excited about this. Hi, Denise. How are you doing today? And welcome.
Hi, thank you. It's really nice to be here. Thank you so much for having me on.
Yeah, I'm so excited about it. So maybe my first question before we dive into the intercultural parenting, can you tell us
hmm
something about yourself and basically what is
hmm
your story?
Yeah, of course. So you were talking about like intercultural relationships, right? And that is basically what I have also with my husband. I am from the Philippines and my husband is Spanish, and we are currently living in Spain. And the reason why that I focus so much on intercultural parenting is because I am a parent coach, and as I was working with my clients, I noticed that one thing that, well, we had many things in common, but one of the things that we had in common was that we all had this intercultural family, right? And for me, the way that I define an intercultural family, it can be that, maybe the parents do have that intercultural relationship, or it can and sometimes it happens, both things are possible, where um the parents are maybe from the same country but they're raising their kids in a totally different one. And what I was seeing in my clients and also in myself was just so much frustration and almost sometimes like a sense of like self-righteousness, where we think that there's something wrong with this culture, that they don't know what they're doing, or why are they doing it this way, can't they see that my way is better? Or it would be also the opposite of like, I'm a terrible parent because the culture around me says that I should be doing it like this and I'm not.
Mm.
And so I don't remember what the question was.
It was just
um
like, what is your story?
but
So,
yeah.
you actually, I want to ask this question. I wanted to ask it later, but maybe I can ask it now. Now, because you mentioned it that when you are in
Hmm.
intercultural relationship, like the cultures are clashing and they are different.
Yeah.
So I wanted to ask, like, what are the most surprising and maybe the unexpected cultural
hmm
differences between you being from
hmm
Philippines and your partner who is from
hmm
Spain?
Yeah, I think well, the thing is, like, a little bit of history for those of you who don't know. Spain was actually sorry, the Philippines was actually colonized by Spain for 300
Mm.
years. So there are many similarities between the Spanish culture and the Filipino culture. But at the same time, the Philippines is in Asia. The Philippines was also colonized by the States and by Japan, and we also have our own original rich culture. And so it's one of those things where it's like, I expect us to think the same, but we don't. Like, in some ways we do, but in other ways we don't. And I think for me, one of the, I guess it could be, yeah, I would say that it is like surprising or unexpected, is the how I have more of that like community family. Well, not, I wouldn't say family because he has that as well, but I think more like that community focus of not just taking care of our family, but also having relationships outside of our family and really nurturing those relationships. While he is so much just much more focused on our family. And
Mm.
and yeah, so that was something that was a bit that I found a bit surprising, because the Spanish culture is also very family oriented, but they don't I didn't and I thought that would continue to like being community focused, and it wasn't there.
Yeah,
um
yeah. I wanted to
yeah.
say it's actually surprising because me coming from Czech Republic, like we always think of Spain, Italy, that they are more family oriented. So it's surprising that you find
Yeah.
it still less compared to Philippines.
Yeah, like they are still family oriented, but it's very much like my family, like my my kids, my parents, my siblings, and their kids. Well, in the Philippines, it's like my husband always jokes because it's like, oh, he's our cousin, he's our relative, and we're like 3 degrees apart. And my husband's like, that's not like that doesn't count anymore. I was like, maybe for you it doesn't, but in the Philippines it still does. Maybe.
Hmm. And does this actually influence somehow how you bring up your two kids? Like, do you bring them more in the Spanish way since you live in Spain,
Hmm.
or in the Filipino way, or it's a combination?
Yeah. I think this in this particular instance of like the family community, I don't think it really influences us in the sense that like my husband also is active, like because he sees me in the community, and we have like this group of families that we are really, supported, and we just see each other all the time, and we help each other, so he kind of sees that as well. um for me, the difference that I found between us, which really affects the way that we raise our kids, is in how he prefers like spontaneity. Like he wants just, things to be like spontaneous, and I prefer structure. And I think that, like just like a short anecdote about me in high school, I remember thinking like, oh, I want to be more spontaneous, and I was like, I should schedule being spontaneous, and I was like, wait, that kind of beats the point. um well, he prefers that like freedom and not having that structure, and I believe more in like having that structure and then having all that freedom, but like within the structure, if that makes
Mhm.
any sense.
Uh,
And so,
yeah.
yeah, I'll go on. And so the way that that clashes in our parenting, I don't remember if I mentioned it earlier. Yes, I did. So I am a parent coach, and one of the reasons why I became a parent coach was because I studied psychology and communication. I've always had this interest in like how the brain works. Like I remember even when I was studying psychology, I remember thinking like, ooh, like I'm gonna remember that when I have kids, like this is how I want to be, like based on like the research that came up and everything. So I was always focused on like I want to learn more. I want to be this way for my children. I think, and again, it's kind of that structure, right? While my husband's more like I just want to be me. Like I just, like I don't want to have to think about what I say when I'm talking to my kids. Well, I'm a bit more like, oh, I still say things, but sometimes I do think like, well, what, how can I say it in a way that is more conscious, or just more, that's more aligned with what I want for our relationship. So that
Mm.
for me was the more of the clash kind of when it comes to raising our family.
Mhm. And actually, I wanted to ask about it if this the way you are more structured and
Hmm.
he is more like free. Is it
Hmm.
something like your individual characteristic, or is it something you would say also it's part of the Filipino culture?
Yeah, yeah. It was actually something that I was wondering about, because I know that you sent me the questions in advance, and I was thinking if it was like a me thing or like a Filipino thing. And in this case, I feel like it's more like a me, a me thing.
Mm-hmm.
Because looking at the Filipino culture, it's like they kind of say like we took everything from the Spanish, and then we magnified it. Where there's like the stereotype where like the Spaniards always arrive late, and they arrive like 30 minutes late, and then the Filipino would arrive like an hour late. Or for us, there's like so much bureaucracy and paperwork in Spain, and it's like even worse in the Philippines. So it's like,
That's interesting, yeah. And it sounds kind of maybe Philippines sounds a bit like Africa as well. Like it sounds a bit similar. And the more women I talk to, like from different countries, it's we kind of grow up in a Europe, in Czech Republic, thinking that the rest of the world is like Europe, like that. What is in Europe? That's the like standard. But then
yeah,
now with time, I realize actually it feels more like the rest of the world it's the normal thing, and then Europe is just different because I see the similarities between, let's say, Southeast Asia, Africa, South America. It sounds so similar, and it is actually really interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Denise, I would like to ask you, then maybe the women who are watching are in the intercultural family, they have kids already or they are planning to. What would be the top three things parents should consider
Hmm.
when bringing up mixed kids?
Yeah. Yeah. So the first one that I guess the first tip kind of that I have is to be aware of the cultures around you. So when I work with my clients, the first thing that we actually do is I ask them like to define the cultures that they identify with, right? Like what are their defining features? And because we think it's kind of like what you were saying earlier, where you think that the way that you were raised, the culture that you grew up in, you think that's like the normal. You think that that is what everyone believes or what everyone has or what everyone expects. And so it's really just be aware of, maybe what you expect or what your culture expects, like what are their defining features, and also what are the defining features of all the other cultures that are a part of your family. That would be the very first thing, to kind of just have that awareness. And within that awareness, also know what is it that you want or like about those cultures, and what is it that you don't like. And I once posted this question, and my client was like, well, I prefer to only focus on the positive. I don't want to talk about the negative. And I was like, well, it's not for me, it's not even about positive or negative or right or wrong. It's just different, right? It's more about what you want and what you don't want. And sometimes if you're not intentional, if you don't at least know what it is that you want and don't want, then it will be harder then for you to go into kind of like the second tip, which is to intentionally create your own family culture,
Mm,
right? So it was like kind of getting based on what her comment was of like, I only want to focus on the positive. Well, that's great, right? And you get the positive, and with the positive, you create your own family culture. But within that, you also have to be aware of these are like the different aspects of the culture I'm in that I might have a hard time with,
mm.
that might go against what I want for
Mm.
my family.
Yeah, I actually love that you said that it's not about different things in different cultures. It's not about one is negative, one is positive, or one is better, one is worse, but it's just different. And I think this is so important to realize, especially like generally for everybody, because these days the world is connected, but
Yeah,
especially for the men and women who are in intercultural relationship, bringing up kids together, it's so important to realize that not that one culture is not better than other one, and
yeah,
it feels obvious, but I think it's not that obvious, and people have to really come to
yeah,
realize that that's the way
yeah.
it is.
Yeah, and I think it's so important as well. Like when we talk about positive, negative, that is so personal, right? Something that's positive for you might be negative for me. Like there's no truth in what is positive and negative when it comes to
Yeah.
cultures. It really just depends on, again, what you want, or what you like for yourself and for your
Mm.
family.
Yeah.
And then the third thing that I have for parents is to don't take things personally. Like this is like for parenting in general, especially when you are in that big emotion stage, where, or I think actually in any stage where, when the kids say things that they don't really mean, right? Like I have another time, they're going through like the phase where the child only wants to be with the mom, doesn't want to be with the dad, and with the dad, the client goes like, I hate you, and the child goes, I hate you, and the kid's like 3 years old, and so it's really about like working with the dad as well, to be like, yeah, that's what he's saying, but he actually doesn't mean it, so don't take
Mm.
it personally. But looking at it from like the intercultural perspective, it's also like, I don't know how it's like over there for you, but I get lots of clients also with, or up with the in-laws, right? Where it's like my in-law said that I should be doing this, my in-law thinks this, my in-law thinks that, and then they take it to mean that their in-law thinks that they're a terrible parent, or their in-law thinks that they don't know what they're doing, right? Where it's
Mm.
really just, it's just a difference in culture.
Mm-hmm.
and as long as you are confident in yourself, as long as you are able to trust in your child and really just believe that you are doing what's right for your family, then it's okay for other people to have their opinions. It's okay for them to say what they want to say, but it doesn't have to, you don't have to take it personally. It doesn't have to mean anything about
Mm.
you.
Yeah. Yeah, this tip you mentioned, it's so important, and it's funny. It's actually in one of my online courses. The first session I have, it's called "Don't Take Things
Yeah.
Personally," because it's the same thing in the intercultural relationship. Like we often I think it's natural to all of us that we take things personally, that we are in the center of everything. But
Yeah.
in most cases, it's not about us at all. Um,
Well,
and
yeah,
I
in most
also
cases.
love. Yeah, you
Yeah,
can go
no, it
ahead.
was just to add on to that. Like in most cases, it has so much more to do with them than with us, right? It
Mm.
has, it's like their story.
Yeah, and even as you said, like that one thing in one culture can be something, and then in the second one it's entirely opposite. Like we have this example which kept happening to me and my husband, is that I tried to be nice when we were
Hmm.
going out. So I told him, "Baby, where would you like to eat? Where would you like to go?" Because I tried to be nice to give him the freedom to choose if we want to eat Chinese, Indian, Zambian, or whatever.
Hmm.
And every time he got upset, and then I find out he wanted me to decide. So it shows that like I am confident, and that's what he wanted. So it's like I tried to do something to be nice, and then he took it exactly the other way. So these are small things, and it has nothing to do with you as a person.
Yeah. Uh, no.
And the way also you mentioned that to create your own family culture. So this is something I really strongly resonate with as well. And just for Easter, I was writing an article to one of the Czech radios about Easter and how we celebrate Czech Easter in Zambia, because we have some specific Czech traditions. And what I said, it's amazing if you have intercultural family, you can actually pick the tradition from each culture and put it like to your. So you get rid of
Yeah.
those you don't like, then you like emphasize those you like, and you have your own thing. So I that's one of the greatest advantages I think of like intercultural families.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And it's about like creating your own traditions, right? Like with Easter and all the other traditions that we have throughout the year. But it's also about um living your day to day in a way that feels right for you, where it's like, just
Mm.
because for taking like your story for example, just because you're in Zambia, that doesn't mean that you have to do everything their way. Like you can still find a way to bring your own, like, to yourself or your Czech culture into what it is that
Mm-hmm.
you do.
Yeah. And my next question to you is about languages. So I
Hmm.
wanted to ask if you have any tips to avoid misunderstanding coming from having two or maybe even three different
Hmm.
languages in your family. And maybe
Yeah.
another question to add on the top of that is like that's the one challenge I know lots of multicultural couples face, is like the languages they speak to their kids. So how do you do it in
Mm.
your case, and what are your tips?
Yeah. Well, I'll start with the languages you speak to your kids because that's a bit easier. So in our case, we loosely follow the one parent, one language. So I speak to my kids in English. My husband speaks to them in Spanish, and it's kind of funny because we're not worried about them learning Spanish because they live in Spain, so it's not an issue. And my husband and I mostly speak to each other in English. So sometimes he forgets and he speaks to our kids in English, and they always reply in Spanish because like they're just used to, like, okay, you're our dad speak, we speak to our dad in Spanish, so even if he talks to them in English, they reply in Spanish. And I think when it comes to raising your kids, what's also really important when you're doing the whole different cultures is that they have interactions with the different languages. So like in my case, I speak to them in English. You know, we regularly speak to my family, and they speak to my kids in English as well. But I also make it a point to meet other families in Madrid, where we live in our city, that also speak English, because I want my kids to know that they're not the only ones who speak English, you know? And so it's really sweet when I see my kids interacting with other kids in English in Spain. You know, it's
Mhm.
really just about recognizing, like, you know, showing them that that language is universal. And there are some people who speak Spanish, there's some people who speak English. My kids also know there are people who speak French and Filipino. And so yeah, that's what it is when it comes to like language with kids, right? Where it's like really more about not just exposing them, but giving them the opportunity to interact with others in that language so that they can really practice using it and see the use of it. As for avoiding misunderstandings, it's funny that you mentioned that, because when you were sharing your story about, you know, choosing the restaurant, I was actually thinking, I was like, oh, that's so good that you were able to have that conversation of what does it mean for you when I ask you what restaurant you want to go to versus like what my intention is. And I think that the tip I have to avoid misunderstanding is, it's kind of like this idea of meta communication, where you talk about how you want to talk, kind of like where you communicate how you want to communicate, or why you are communicating. And a lot of one question that helps a lot, when my husband says something and I'm like, and I just ask, like, what do you mean by that?
Mm.
And and then I go, and then, you know, depending on the situation, sometimes it goes into like, well, you know, when you say things this way, you know, I feel like this, it makes me think this. So, you know, could you do it another way? Could you do it this other way instead?
Mm.
And so it's I think, especially when it, because misunderstanding happens even if you're speaking the same language, grew up in the same place, like misunderstandings happen, period. And I think it's understanding that they happen, and just being more open to figuring out how they can happen less
Mm.
by being curious.
Mm. Yeah, I love that you mentioned that it's so important to communicate about our communication. I never put it in these words, but I completely agree that we have the tendency to interpret like what
Mhm.
our husband or partner says, and then we can get all crazy, get upset. Then in the end, we find out like he meant something different. So it's
Yeah.
really so important, and especially if we speak different languages, if maybe the language is not our mother tongue.
Mhm.
And it's also what is so interesting is like the huge amount of like variation in how multicultural families are. I found it so interesting that you live in Spain, so but you speak with your husband English,
Mhm.
and then the kids learn Spanish and this. So, and in my case, we live in Zambia. The official language is English. We speak English at home, and I struggle, for example, to speak to my son in Czech because I'm so
Yeah.
used like English around me. So I actually admire you, and maybe you have some tips how to do this, that you speak to your kids in English in a
Yeah.
Spanish speaking country, because I find it so difficult now to switch in Czech when everybody around me is speaking English.
Yeah. I wish I had a tip for you. I think it just came so naturally to me, because when I was looking into the whole, like, you know, how will they learn language, what language will they speak, one thing that really stood out to me was like, just speak the language of your heart, where it's like, especially in the beginning, in the early years, like, what's so much more important than the language they learn is the foundation of the relationship that you will have with them.
Mm-hmm.
And so in my case, it just came out naturally that I would speak to them in English. because
Mm.
that was like that was the way that I found that I could express myself best with them.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Although I do have a client who is in that similar position where she is the only one speaking her language, and everyone else is speaking Dutch actually, and she's the only one speaking Bulgarian. And for her, it's just she's just like it's just I think for her it's just she knows why it's so important to her that she just keeps doing it even when it's hard.
Mm.
And now she was telling me how, you know, all her other friends who are also from Bulgaria and raising their kids abroad, their kids don't speak Bulgarian, but hers do. And she's just like, yeah, it's
Mm.
worth it. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah,
so I'd
in
be
theory also, yeah, we had the plan that like our son should speak all three languages. So
mhm,
English, Czech, and then Bemba, which is one of the Zambian languages.
mhm,
But for now, he speaks like it's obvious now his first English language is English because he also goes to like school and he's English. And if you are wondering, my son is 2 years and he goes to school. That's how in Zambia, school is everything like
yeah.
kindergarten and this. So it's and then Czech he speaks some words and he will probably have to improve to just to speak with his grandmother and grandfather. And Bemba it's almost nothing for now. And I wanted to ask you actually because you mentioned that you speak to your kids in English, but you did not mention Filipino. So I wanted
Mhm,
to ask if you had like any plans regarding to this. And why I'm
mhm,
asking is, and this I remember that it was Trevor Noah who said it. He's a mixed guy from South Africa. If you know him, he's
yeah.
amazing. He said that the him as a mixed kid, he felt that he never fitted anywhere. But
Mm,
if he knew the language, that was his entrance. And I love this idea that as many languages our kids will speak, it will allow them to go to one of the culture because they are mixed. They will never be 100% of anything, so this will give
yeah.
them like more opportunities, I think.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. The only reason I don't speak to my kids in Filipino is because I don't speak Filipino. Like
Mm-hmm.
my Filipino level is very low. It's very basic. And so going back to kind of like the language of the heart, right? What language do I best express myself in?
Mm-hmm.
It really is English. But at the same time, I guess similar to what Trevor Noah was saying of like just the importance of language and being able to fit in, I also would like my kids to speak Filipino or at least understand it or at least have a basic idea of what it is. And so what we actually do is they watch a show in Filipino. And so that's kind of like at least they're like basic exposure to it.
Mm-hmm.
And we have in our family we do have like several words that are Filipino that we use. Like I
Mm-hmm.
don't know what do we use. We have this expression in Tagalog which is called "hay nako," which has like no English, no English translation, and it's more just like when something happens and you feel like exasperated or frustrated, you use "hay nako," like you know, like when something falls or when a glass of water spills, you just go "hay nako." So
Mm. Yeah, we do the same, and I think lots of
right.
families do this, that we have this some words in one of the languages and we just use them. Then you
Yeah.
forget about it, you mention it in front of somebody else and you look funny, but yeah, it's nice.
Yeah.
And yeah, Denise, maybe last question before we wrap up is like
Hmm.
if you have any secret advice for couples to avoid
Hmm.
conflicts in
Hmm.
parenting or
Yeah.
in relationships in
Yeah.
general.
Yeah. I would say don't avoid conflict. That's my that's my secret advice, to embrace conflict and to see it as an opportunity to connect with your partner and to understand them in a different way. And when you have the conflict, I think that's why again the family culture, the idea of like your family culture, your family values, that for me is so important that you define what that is for you, for your family with your partner, so that when the conflicts come again, it doesn't go back to you're right, I'm wrong, or more like I'm wrong and you're right. It goes back to what is it that we want for our family,
Mm.
and really just remember that conflicts are an opportunity to get curious and connect.
Mm. Yeah, I think that's a great way how to finish this talk. So thank you so much. It was very interesting, and I'm sure it was very helpful. For me, definitely it was helpful, and I believe it will be helpful for the women who are watching. And
Yeah.
you mentioned you are a parenting coach. So if
Yeah.
somebody is watching and they want to find you to see what you are doing, where they can find you.
Yeah. So the best place that you can actually find me is on my Facebook group. I have a Facebook group. It's called Raising Your Intercultural Family con Cariño. And so con cariño is Spanish, which can loosely be translated to with affection. Because what I found was, with the like hectic day to day of parenting, we've actually forgotten to treat our kids, ourselves, and our partners with that affection. And if you're not on Facebook, you can also just visit my website. It's my name, denissuarez.com, where you can get a bit of what it is that I do. And if what I shared today really resonated with you, and if you feel like you're in that place where you want to be more intentional about the family that you're creating, if you really want to define what are your family values, what is your family culture, how can you live it today, then send me a message and I would love to help you with that.
Yeah, I will put the links under the video so you can find it. So thank you so much for
Thank
accepting
you.
the invitation,
Yeah.
and I wish everybody who is watching a great day. Feel free to share any questions in comments. We will be excited to hear from you,
Yes.
what resonated with you, what you liked, and maybe if there is something which really gave you the light bulb moment and it will impact your parenting or relationship. So thank
Yes.
you again and have a great day.
Bye.